Let's start. Welcome to everyone to this ISGAN Virtual Learning webinar on the ISGAN Lighthouse Project, whose topic is the long-term planning and implementation of smart distribution grids. Before starting, let me introduce you to ISGAN, which hosts this webinar. I'm Matteo Troncia. I represent ISGAN, the ISGAN Virtual Learning, and ISGAN is the short name for the International Smart Grid Action Network, a technology collaboration program of the International Energy Agency. ISGAN is also an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, formally established in 2011. ISGAN creates a strategy platform to support high-level government attention and action for the accelerated development and deployment of smarter and cleaner electricity grids around the world. ISGAN consists of 27 contracting parties. They nominate representatives, form the executive committee, headed by the Presidium and assisted by two co-secretariats. The ISGAN activity is organized in working groups. Working Group 3, Cost-Benefit Analysis and Toolkits. Working Group 5, Smart Grid International Research Facility Network. Working Group 6, Power Transmission and Distribution Systems. Working Group 7, Smart Grid Transitions. Working Group 9, Flexibility Markets, and the Communication Working Group. ISGAN's vision is to accelerate progress on key aspects of smart grid policy, technology, and investment through the voluntary participation by governments in projects and programs. ISGAN activities focus on five principal areas: policy standards and regulation, finance and business models, technology system development, workforce skills and knowledge, user and consumer engagement. ISGAN facilitates dynamic knowledge sharing, technical assistance, peer review, and where appropriate, project coordination among its contracting parties. The ISGAN value proposition relies on conferences and workshops, policy and technology briefs, discussion and technical papers, casebooks, and webinars. Within ISGAN, virtual learning offers the ISGAN community means of rational and continuous technical skills update in the field of smart grids. The virtual learning is proposed as a set of e-learning and reading core module dealing with the entire value chain of smart grids. The webinar of today is titled Long-Term Planning and Implementation of Smart Distribution Grids. In this webinar, ISGAN Virtual Learning and the ISGAN Lighthouse Project on the Smart Distribution Grids invite you to this introduction to a new framework for understanding the long-term planning and implementation of smart distribution grids. This framework offers insight to help navigate the landscape of increasing complexity and uncertainty associated with the smart grid distribution network modernization. The framework lays out five essential phases of long-term planning and three enabling conditions, offering a structured understanding of how different actor groups are involved in these processes. The webinar also incites key messages from the ISGAN Policy Brief on this theme, which was recently launched in conjunction with the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting, SEM 15 in Brazil. Our speakers are Elena Lindquist, project manager and manager of ISGAN Lighthouse Project on Smart Distribution Grids, Susanne Akeby, ISGAN Working Group 6 manager on the Working Group on Power Transmission Distribution System and part of the Research Institute of Sweden, and Klaus Kubecko, ISGAN Working Group 7 on Smart Grid Transitions and from the Austrian Institute of Technology, AIT. Feel free to use anytime the question and answer tool to pose your questions that the speaker will answer at the end of the presentation. And as usual, the webinar recording will be available through the ISGAN YouTube channel. Okay, now it's time to leave the floor to the speakers. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Helena Lindquist, and as Matteo said, I'm the national expert from Sweden in ISGAN's communication working group and also the project manager of ISGAN's Lighthouse Project on the long-term planning and implementation of smart distribution grids. And I'm very, very happy to be here today together with my great ISGAN colleagues, Susanne Akeby and Klaus Kubecko. So I'll let them say hello. Themselves.
Yes, hello, Helena. I also want to echo the same. Very happy to be here and that people are here to listen to what we have worked with. And I said, I'm Susanne Akeby. I'm leading the Working Group 6 on Power T&D systems.
And Klaus, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm Klaus Gebetschke from the Austrian Institute of Technology and working in the working group on smart grid transition and institutional change. And I'm happy to guide you also through some of the aspects that we have been working on.
Great. So, Klaus, if you share the agenda, I'll introduce it to you. We'll start off with a brief introduction to the ISGAN Lighthouse Project on smart distribution grids, what that project is about. The main focus will then be on introducing this new framework that we have developed within the project that's aimed to provide guidance and promote informed dialogues about grid modernization planning processes worldwide. We will then finish our presentation by sharing some of the highlights from our recent policy brief to the Clean Energy Ministerial. Then, of course, we look forward to your questions in the Q&A session. So, what is the ISGAN Lighthouse Project on smart distribution grid about? It's a new strategic initiative that we launched last year in 2023. The next slide, please. That is aimed at harnessing the collective expertise and innovative potential of the whole ISGAN global community of experts in new ways. So in this initiative, we are exploring new ways of working within and between the ISGAN working groups and also with our external stakeholders. So we have a very synergistic project structure and a range of complementary activities contributing to the key deliverables in many different ways. So a key feature of this project is that we actually mobilize the whole ISGAN community around one shared theme for the first time in this way, and to which all working groups can actually contribute with relevant knowledge from different perspectives. So the broad and multifaceted theme for this inaugural Lighthouse project is focused specifically on distribution grids and what is required to efficiently and adequately plan and implement these to be fit for the future. So I also want to mention here that we in this project take an actor-focused perspective and look at how different key actors have different roles and responsibilities and how they actually interact with each other in the long-term planning and implementation process. So this image is more to give you a little bit of a flavor of our approach. A key feature of the Lighthouse project is that of collaborative co-creation of high quality knowledge products involving a large number of people in a highly interactive and democratic manner, trying to look at these difficult, complex issues from as many perspectives as possible. We also engage with representatives from the key actor groups on the ground to learn from their practical experience. And in this project, we take a global perspective and we try to shed light on the shared challenges and how these are manifested across different geographies. And of course, one of the key objectives is to promote international knowledge sharing and collaboration on innovative approaches that there are around the world and also lessons learned from different geographies. So we will shortly get a more in-depth look at some of the results of this project, but here's an overview of the main outcomes so far. So, as mentioned before, we have a policy brief to the Clean Energy Ministerial that we launched on the 1st of October at the CEM 15 meeting in Brazil. And we have also, we are developing a more comprehensive online knowledge resource on this theme. We currently have a pilot version that we're working on, but it's not yet public. And of course, other important outcomes is that we are actually exploring and developing new ways of working together and with our stakeholders, and also strengthening the network as the personal networks between the experts, so where the knowledge can develop and be shared. So now after this introduction, we'll turn our attention to the thematics. We'll start with the context. So our starting point is for the Lighthouse Project is the important pledge that 133 countries from around the world signed at the Climate COP meeting in 2023, the COP28, where governments pledged to triple renewable energy capacity globally by 2030 2030 to double the global average rate of energy efficiency improvements by the same date, and also accelerating just and inclusive energy transitions. And these are ambitious goals, but critical energy policy goals on the path to decarbonizing our energy systems. So we in ISGAN, we know that distribution grids, the grids at the low and medium voltage levels, play an extremely important role in the realization of these goals. So without the adequate grid modernization efforts on the ground, the clean and renewable energy transition cannot be realized. So, however, upgrading and modernizing and expanding distribution grids is no easy task for the actors involved. It's a highly complex endeavor fraught with multiple uncertainties. And in our project, we have seen that many countries worldwide face many shared challenges, but they're manifested in different ways, depending on geographic factors, level of economic development, and similar. So in the Lighthouse Project, we have identified the key actor groups that play crucial roles in long-term planning and implementation. And ISGAN's ambition is really to provide relevant guidance to these actor groups through our new framework that you'll hear about in a minute. So we'll come back a little bit more in detail to these actor groups later on. But the mandates and responsibilities, I should say, of these different actor groups can vary quite a lot across different geographies, different countries, and the roles can also overlap. And not only do these actors need to collaborate with each other to improve and accelerate grid planning processes. As the complexity of the evolving energy landscape grows, these key actors also need to be more proactive and involve and partner with other energy sector actors, of course, as well, such as transmission system planners, energy suppliers, and aggregators, and so on. And I will now hand over to Klaus and Susanne to introduce this new framework for long-term planning and implementation that we have developed in the project. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Helena, for the introduction. Like a main finding of our project was that we have to have a new approach of planning, definitely for all the challenges that we have. The approach proposed is on the basis of what we have achieved in the Lighthouse Project, the consultations that we had, and it's a dynamic, inclusive, and uncertainty-focused approach, making it more suitable for the complex and rapidly changing environment of the modern energy system. The conventional grid planning approach, on the other hand, while comprehensive and structured, is often reactive, strategic, and rigid, limiting its effectiveness in addressing evolving challenges such as technological advancements, structural change of demand and generation on the grid edge, policy challenges and changes over climate-related risk. So here you see an overview of the old and the new approach. Just let me briefly go through, mainly focusing on what the new approach that we suggest based on the Lighthouse Project results are. The proposed approach of forward-looking adaptive scenario planning is different from the reactive approach, which is based to some form of master plans, has several key aspects: flexibility and adaptability. And the emphasis here in the new approach is emphasizing adaptability and iterative planning, allowing for adjustment based on real-time data, changing circumstances and emerging challenges such as technological innovation or policy shifts. The second point is directly addressing uncertainty by incorporating scenario-based planning, risk assessment, and resilience measures to prepare for multiple potential futures. In decision-making, decisions need to be made iteratively and collaboratively, incorporating inputs from diverse stakeholders and continuous refinement based on updated insights. The integration of stakeholders is extremely important here, and actively engaging them as wide as possible throughout the planning process, promoting collaboration and shared accountability. With respect to data, it's important to emphasize that it leverages advanced tools, real-time data, and scenario modeling to create agile evidence-based plans, while the conventional approach relies more on historical data and established trends, often lacking the capability to incorporate dynamic real-time information. And also important is that the new approach focuses on long-term plans. That means 10, even to 20-year plans, and that they are updated frequently, every 2-3 years, to reflect the changing conditions, maintaining relevance over time, as opposed to the conventional and reactive approach, which was planning phases up to 5 years in the distribution grid. Okay, so the new framework, or for the new framework, we have identified 5 phases to be relevant. The foresight and strategic intelligence phase, the strategic decision-making, long-term planning as such, the assessment and decision support, and implementation. We will briefly highlight some aspects of the key activities, outcomes, and key issues to consider. And I will start first with foresight. The key activities of foresight are data collection and analysis, scenario planning, and as highlighted already, stakeholder engagement. Foresight and strategic intelligence play a crucial role in long-term planning for future resilience distribution grids, particularly in uncertain and complex environments. This phase is critical for ensuring that strategic decisions are based on robust and actionable information, even if accurate predictions of future requirements and planning cannot be made. By systematically incorporating foresight and strategic intelligence, grid planners and other actor groups can ensure that decisions made today will be resilient, forward-looking, and adaptable to future challenges. The aim is to reach a comprehensive understanding of needs and challenges for future resilience distribution grids and to identify viable pathways. The outcome expected here is to have a strategic foresight report that guides decision-making and planning. Key issues to be considered are participatory foresight processes, in which stakeholder engagement is a strategy for dealing with uncertainty in complex environments. Participatory foresight processes with the relevant actor groups and stakeholders help in exploring the scenarios of possible futures and to find strategic ground for transition pathways. Furthermore, an issue is to perform a broad horizon scanning, reflect on basic assumptions, to be prepared for the changes to be expected in the power system sector due to the massive electrification. And the basic assumptions about planning and practices might become outdated and blur a clear view on the new challenges. Another issue is considering societal, environmental, and economic perspectives, a broader perspective than was previously in the conventional approach done, and to understand the perspectives of other actor groups and grid users through the participatory process. Important is also to mention that transparency and trust in the foresight process outcomes are of fundamental importance. The second phase is a strategic decision making. Each actor's organization with responsibility responsibilities and a mandate to develop long-term grid plans is advised to come up with a clear strategic position. This phase deals with how the grid development should look like and how to reach a new state of the grid in line with this transition. The strategic decisions are both for the overall network planning what capacity is needed, as well as for the more concrete planning regarding how to realize the access to these capacities. Key activities are identifying strategic options, multi-criteria analysis, risk assessment, policy alignment, and developing basic principles and guidelines for long-term planning. As an outcome, you can see a strategic document, a white paper, which serves as a foundation and guidance for strategic long-term planning of the organization. It should provide in-depth analysis of trends and drivers, identifying potential opportunities and threats. This includes consequences for the planning process. Some key issues here are adapting organizational goals and long-term missions to the changing realities, complexities and uncertainties, to adapt to national regional framework conditions that steer the direction, orchestrate with other actors, and to consider technical alternatives to traditional grid reinforcement. I think for the matter of time, I will not go into the determining key principles and criteria that have to be also developed. And I now hand over to Susanne for the third phase. You're muted.
That was not a good thing. Sorry, I'm on mute. So then we go into the third phase. And here we discuss the long-term planning, which considers the grid development needs that was identified in the foresight phase that Klaus mentioned. And based on this, identified possible grid development solutions. The plan will then provide the basis for formal reporting, approval, and decision-making. There are, of course, many key issues to consider, but for example, the need here to plan for affordable, reliable, and sustainable grid. The need here, or requirement, depending on which country you are in, for doing actual long-term planning is new for many DSOs, which earlier could mainly focus on the short or mid-term planning that are based on fairly known situations. So the need for having longer time horizons, and together with new types of loads, like, for example, those from electrification of the transport sector and the shift in production mix, where we have a higher degree on intermittent energy sources, adds an increased amount of uncertainty and of complexity that must be considered in the planning. Additional complexity is also added since the planners should include the contributions and impacts from new actors and new types of solutions, like, and here we can mention the aggregators and other flexibility providers, and how to consider impact from flexibility markets and some technical solutions, etc. And of course, to then manage to consider the uncertainties and complexity in plannings, there is a need for having good enabling tools and methods. And also here it's important with collaboration between stakeholders to get all the input that is needed to create accurate plans. The increased uncertainty also brings a need, which also has been earlier mentioned, to have adaptable plans and solutions that can be adjusted due to how the reality turned out or seems to turn out compared to the plan that was earlier put in place. So next slide, please, Klaus. Yeah. So the fourth phase we call the assessment and decision support. And here there is an assessment of the suggested development options that then forms the foundations for the decisions to take. and the decision then initiates and the investment and implementation process. The increased complexity and uncertainty and the needs to consider new actors and solutions that I mentioned for the previous phase also impacts the assessment, since these are the new actors and solutions needs to be taken into consideration in an accurate way in the evaluation of the suggested options. And to ensure that the future distribution grids will be an enabler for the sustainable development goals, which are our sort of main goal here, it's very important to consider multiple factors in the evaluation, where you need to include economic, social, and environmental dimensions of the grid development, but also addressing uncertainties, risks, and resilience factors. And to be able to realize the adaptable plans and solutions that we mentioned, the decision process must enable the possibilities to update the grid development plans. And these development plans will be based then on measurements and other relevant data that you could use to calibrate with the latest information. I also want to underline here that having tools and methods for evaluating multiple factors are very important, but it's also very important that which criteria to choose and how they should be prioritized between them is very important. And this is an input that you would receive from this strategic decision-making phase. And also a thing to lift is that additional to the importance of valuing all the benefits of an investment is that you also value the consequence if the decision is not taking that you should invest. And here I just wanted to give a hint that ISGAN had actually developed a smart grid evaluation toolkit that could help decision maker, where the techno-economic assessment of the alternatives integrates cost-benefit analysis and a multi-criteria analysis framework. And this is available from the ISGAN webpage under Working Group 3. Next slide. So the fifth phase then, when we have done all decisions, is to do the actual implementation. And in this phase, then everything should be done that leads us to having a technical and market-based solution in place that provide a modernized distribution grid that are capable of meeting the needs that were identified. And the implementation needs to be done in a way that you enable the coexistence and coordination of this very complex system. And it must also be done to provide means to the DSOs to manage the requirements or the situation they are in now with their new role, having much of the production and new loads connected to them. And this requires ability for visualizing the actual operational situation, having robust control possibilities, and also to be able to share information and data in a secure and reliable way. And I also just, as the last thing, would like to stress that one critical success factor here is, of course, to ensure that we have have skilled human resources that can do this work. Next slide.
Okay, then for all this, what we have just mentioned that the key stakeholders should do, mainly the DSOs or utility operators will come to that point in detail later, requires framework conditions that enable this forward-looking planning approach. And we have identified 3 such framework conditions, or have summarized the framework conditions that we have collected in 3 categories: legal and governance framework, actor coordination and collaboration, and information and knowledge infrastructure. And as already mentioned, it is important to distinguish between the different actor groups that are involved. On this table, you can see what the roles are. We are not going into detail here, but as I already mentioned, it's important to have, obviously, in planning and implementation, utilities or distribution system operators, the technology people in technology, in real planning, the chief technical officer, if you want, the utilities CEO, who's definitely in charge of the long-term strategy to be implemented in most countries, in also as a legal requirement. What we have found, what is not always really highlighted in the old approach, is that also the grid owners as such are important players in the long-term decisions, as the managers often not are capable of making this long-term and investment decisions that go beyond this short term. Other important actors that should also be mentioned are technology providers, of course, transmission system actors, grid users and citizens, active or passive, intermediate actors and researchers. Those actor groups, the two actor groups, the last ones, the actor group of local and regional governments, and the energy policy actors are those whom we address with the policy brief. And for this, I hand over to Helena.
Yes, so, well, ministers and senior level energy policymakers really have a key responsibility to provide some of the essential framework conditions enabling efficient long-term planning processes to take place in the first place. So to highlight the key areas that really require attention at this level, we produced this policy brief that we presented at an official side event to the Clean Energy Ministerial meeting in Brazil in October. And as I mentioned before, we take the global energy goals expressed in the COP28 pledge as our starting point. And in this policy brief, we argue that low and medium voltage grids require increased policy attention and we stress that failure to address grid modernization investment needs at the local and regional levels put these energy goals in jeopardy. We also highlight that the much needed investments in the thousands and thousands of distribution grids worldwide is seriously hampered by the growing complexity and multiple uncertainties facing the grid actors on the ground. So in this situation, policymakers really have a key role and opportunity to play to de-risk investment by reducing some of the uncertainties and creating favorable framework conditions for the planning processes to be efficient and forward-looking. So the policy brief that Klaus and Susanne will now introduce includes 4 key messages and associated areas of concrete actions to take, and you'll get the link at the end to this policy brief you read for yourself. So yeah, Klaus.
Yeah. Thank you. Before going into the concrete messages, just let me briefly highlight why there is urgency of making distribution grid modernization a policy priority. The full benefit of increasing renewable energy sources integration and the acceleration of electrification hinge on reinforcing and modernization of our low and medium voltage grids. Without the reinforcement, a multi-year delay in grid connections will slow down the deployment of the critical technologies and undermining our energy transition efforts. The current infrastructure bottleneck poses a serious obstacle, threatening the pace at which we can achieve our decarbonization targets and hampering economic developments. So the road ahead is cobbled with challenges, including for households and businesses who will be required to shoulder increasing costs of building and maintaining infrastructure. The need for extensive investment in low and medium voltage grids is now recognized as far more substantial than previously anticipated and is actually felt by many actors on the ground. The International Energy Agency estimates that after over a decade of stagnation, smart grid investment will need to nearly double globally by 2030 and only 2030 and then later on as well, to over $600 billion annually. Without immediate coordinated action, the security, affordability, and quality of services for households and business could easily be compromised. Another point is climate-related costs are expected to be substantial, but they are underrepresented in current investment estimates due to uncertainty in the predictions, and the growing frequency of extreme events is obvious became obvious in the last year. Electricity grids will need to be upgraded and redesigned to withstand those impacts of increasing severe hurricanes, floods, heat waves, wildfires, and as well as cyber attacks. Helena already mentioned the issue of de-risking. Energy policy play a critical role in de-risking infrastructure investments to attract the necessary capital for grid modernization. Policymakers must therefore craft policies that support and incentivize smart grid upgrades and reduce uncertainties for grid owners, operators, and the planners. We want to highlight here that long-term planning means action now, and it's not about acting in 10 years, but it's really about acting now also for the policymakers.
Yes, so the first message that we presented is about legal and regulatory frameworks, and that confidence to invest in smart distribution grids require reliable and supportive legal and institutional conditions for a long-time planning horizon.
So we have communicated to the Clean Energy Ministerial that long-term planning requires them, the ministers on all levels and all countries, to provide framework conditions that result in confidence to invest, thus de-risking future long-term investments. We cannot discuss all of them, but let me just highlight 3 of them. Nobody will object when asking lawmakers, regulators to ensure a predictable and robust legislative and regulatory framework. Everybody will agree. But it is also important that this has some endurance and transcends election cycles and links grid planning to long-term policy targets. Also clarifying the roles and mandates for all actor groups, including public and private grid owners, has to be highlighted. So it's not only the distribution system operators or utilities that are involved. And it's important to enshrine the national consensus on electricity being treated as a universal basic service or an essential service that needs to be made available to all people, and how this is taken into account on long-term planning of local grid is something that needs to be highlighted.
Yes, and then our second message point at the importance of actor coordination and collaboration. And here we see that planning of medium and low voltage grids demands broader coordination across key actors in the energy sector. And this is something that we see will facilitate the de-risking the upfront investments for lasting and efficient smart grid infrastructures.
So policymakers have to encourage and facilitate the coordination among all actors. 2 points to be highlighted: promote a shared language and vision among actor groups to ensure common understanding as a basis for coordination and collaboration. We have experienced that it's really hard for actor groups that haven't been working together over the last decades, now having to act on that. They don't yet have a shared language. As the actual owners of grid infrastructure, be they public or private, and which is not always identical. So the grid ownership and the ownership in distribution system operation or utilities is not identical. They have to be also considered as actor groups here and integrated into these activities. Therefore, the policy brief recommends to establish a global forum for infrastructure investment strategies of public and private grid owners, as this is a new challenge for them.
And the third message then underlines the need for transition to new planning practices. So where long-term planning must be adapted for new complex realities, and this requires shifting from traditional master plan approaches to more forward-looking, agile and scenario-based approaches.
I'd like to highlight 3 points. We already highlighted that we need to move away from reactive planning approaches to adaptive scenario-based approaches. The policy brief requests, therefore, policymakers to implement incentives for adaptive planning practices and consideration of innovation scenarios. For example, the leveraging of technical and market-based flexibilities. Second point, aligning regulations to the new realities and set longer-term planning horizons, sometimes with approval intervals which are set to 5 years, which is far too long in this rapidly changing world. So aligning those planning horizons and approval horizons is important. And for better managing increased uncertainties and reduced predictability, regulators might also update the planning principles which are communicated to the distribution system operators or utilities.
Good. And the fourth and last message that we highlighted puts the spotlight then on knowledge and information infrastructure, where policymakers should ensure the availability of sufficient knowledge and data infrastructure to support agile planning and resilient operations. So this includes building a knowledge base for planning of smart grids and also promoting data sharing.
Yeah, so there should be a strategy implemented for smart grid data sharing among actor groups, which today might see them as proprietary data. For example, smart meter data. The number of generation capacities of photovoltaics and new loads added through heat pumps, for example, are not always shared, but this is really an important aspect. We've seen this and we have been reported, for example, from South Africa and other countries that the uptake of those new technologies is so rapidly that they can not even understand why they have a grid overload. Policymakers and regulators should also equip key actors with tools and know-how to adopt forward-looking and long-term planning approaches and ensure the availability of knowledgeable staff or consultancy services. And finally, a point that was also identified is the need for risk assessment on climate change to support financing decision-making, and of increasing importance, it's also for insurability, including reinsurance policies or reinsurers that need to know what is coming up to them in the future. Good, so that were the policy brief messages.
So yes, thank you both so much, Susanne and Klaus, for this great introduction to all our work that we have put in collectively. We should also mention that there's a lot of people that have been involved in co-creating these results. So thank you to everyone. You know who you are. So, well, I think we all feel the great urgency of the energy transition and the need to keep progressing towards our towards meeting our climate targets. So, well, the COP28 energy pledge is a key step in this direction. Very, very challenging for everyone involved around the world, but very, very critical. So what we are striving for in the ISGAN Lighthouse Project is to signal to policymakers and other key actor groups around the world that distribution grids really are at the very, very core of this great energy system transformation. And the deployment and uptake of renewable energy generation really depend on it. We also want to put the spotlight on long-term planning and the need for urgently changing planning practices to be able to face the new, much more complex realities. And our ambition with our project is to provide very concrete guidance to key actor groups so that they can transition into the forward-looking, proactive and adaptive planning approaches that are needed. So we know that actors face the same or very similar challenges all over the world, and we see great potential to join forces and learn more from each other. So we see that ISGAN has really a key role to promote this international understanding and knowledge sharing of this critical theme. Well, since this is a very complex, very deep, very multifaceted theme, we in ISGAN will continue to work on this in the coming year or years. So we would really like to recommend you to follow us on LinkedIn and to sign up for our newsletter and to learn more about the new activities that we are planning and how you can get involved. So with this, we thank you for your attention and hand over to Matteo to guide us through the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helena. Thank you, Susanne. Thank you, Klaus, for presenting and sharing with us the process there and also the result of the long-term planning and implementation of Smart Distribution Grids project, the Lighthouse project for ISGAN, that really represented the value proposition of ISGAN. So put together information and perspective from different countries and try to formulate key messages. I encourage the audience to put your questions in the question and answer tool or even in the chat, so that Helena, Susanne, and Klaus can clarify any doubt that you may have. And but I will start with mine. I have two questions, and the phases that you present really represent like a kind of roadmap in order to define a planning methodology that deals with uncertainty and complexity. And how do you see this roadmap applicable all over the world? Is valid for all countries participating to ISGAN or in general? And if there is some aspect that can be customized and tailored depending on the context. So we'll be taking this one.
Klaus, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, as the presenters and the project team is quite Eurocentric, it might look like as if this is only for Europe. That's why we have intended to involve people from all over the world, from all continents. Certainly in some countries that have a lot of different distribution system operators or utilities, that might be really the biggest challenge, like Germany, like maybe Switzerland in Europe, but also in the US and in Canada, where you have a lot of different distribution system operators. In some other countries, you have also on the distribution system level, just one big player. They might be capable of doing these different phases very concretely. I think given the uncertainties, and the uncertainties are all over the world, and we have heard them, the quick changes, the basic 5 phases will be necessary for all. How it's implemented then might be different, and also the stakeholder engagement or the actor engagement might be different, because sometimes roles overlap. But yeah, we think that it's important, and that's why we made it also as a global framework relevant.
The phases are on a quite, as on a high level so the details, as Klaus say, the details would probably differs, but you need to look at the different steps, and it's also a way for, this framework, it's also a way for the discussions and for getting an understanding on what different actors in different phases needs from each other in different steps. So to showcase that the whole planning and that you are then taking decisions on it sort of builds on the foresight or the information that you prepare in these earlier stages where you look at scenarios and needs far away. And also the sort of the regulations and the guidance that you set in the strategic decisions, that sort of steers what is then done in the planning and in the decision taking. So everything is linked together, and we think it's good to try to just showcase and for the discussions between the different actors to get the understanding there on their sort of dependability on each other. Yeah, sorry if I interrupted you there, Klaus. It wasn't my intention.
I could add that we're really hoping that this could provide help and guidance to having structured dialogues in specific geographies about this, because it will look different in different geographies depending on the local context, but that this could provide a framework to find each other, who needs to talk to whom about what at what stage. So to structure this up and to highlight, key issues that need to be taken into account at specific points in time. And I should also mention that in the ongoing work, we plan to provide more details to this. We have great ambitions, but we also, there are some limitations to what we can do, but we'll really endeavor to try to fill this framework with as much concrete guidance as possible. So, and also we'll try to engage with stakeholders from the different actor groups in the different activities that we're planning in the coming year. So, yes.
Thank you very much for your answer. Well, I kindly ask Klaus if you can show the last slide with the link to the report, because I think that so that the QR code is available for the audience, and because the second question that I have, I repeat, and I encourage the audience to put their questions in the chat or using the question answer tool. We can make a try like okay, so that there is an example. So the second question is about the policy messages that have been formalized, and I think that they are like strong suggestions about things to take into account when in the stage of addressing long-term planning, considering the uncertainty and the complexity of the modern distribution grid. And to formalize those messages has been like a kind of work of trying to understand and synthesize the information. But in your opinion, which would be the hardest one to implement, and which would be the easiest one?
Good question.
Well, maybe it's not black or white. It's like there's a lot of stages, lots of details to this. There's kind of the headline level here, but there are certain things that take longer time than other things, like developing regulation. It takes a long time. On the other hand, Klaus, I think you might have to come in and correct me, but I'm thinking that you can actually do quite a lot to help the matters on the actor coordination collaboration side of things. If you just started dialogues early, you can help things along, and you can encourage actors to share knowledge with each other, share data, and that kind of thing. So, but there are other things that might take longer, be trickier, and maybe render more conflict also at local and maybe a national level. So.
Yeah.
And I agree. And all the four, as you say, I was just starting to, I mean, interesting questions, starting to looking who is the easiest one. But it's, as you say, I mean, maybe that is an easy one to start with, but to sort of having the perfect collaboration, that's a big target. But I think for all of them, we need to get started, and we need to just realize the importance of trying to improve in all of these aspects. So,
I mean, on the long-term planning aspect, the European Commission has already put forward the regulation that there have to be 10-year plans, and every 2 years they have to be updated. So this might be something that could be copied in the rest of the world. If it makes sense, but even like in Europe, it has to be done. Like we have identified only Denmark that already has really implemented this, and we found interesting experiences there. So for the lawmakers, I mean, this is something that can be done rather quickly if they really want to do it. And I agree to Helena on the collaboration. I mean, you can do collaboration whenever you want. The regulators can communicate and try to bring together the different DSOs that they can exchange. But as I said, also, like what is really important is that cities and those in charge on the public side in ownership who haven't been involved because the planning was short term and it was just a communication between the regulator and the distribution system operator or utility for a very long time in many countries. This will be just important to have this more collaboration, more working together, and also for like we have seen that really industry and businesses are pushing for this kind of coordination because they lack access to grid capacities in the short term.
And I guess we should also push a little bit for this knowledge sharing and building knowledge, which is something that is close to our heart in ISGAN, where we see a big benefit of getting together and sharing experiences and challenges and can help each other with a lot of these measures for the challenges, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. My last question is about in the different country, who should take the action and drive for implementing those key policy messages? Who are the recipients, for example, if the stakeholders like distribution system operators or the national regulatory agencies?
Yeah, the regulatory bodies is one important actor here, I would say, since they form sort of the framework which the distribution operators need to follow and listen to, but also for governments that they have the right ambition, the right point.
Okay, thank you very much. It's clear. Okay, we reached the end of our webinar, so I kindly ask Elena, Susanne, and Klaus to, I mean, if they have something to remark and it's before closing. So please.
Well, we're very happy to get this opportunity to present our results, and we hope that you who have been here today and those who listen to this webinar or see this webinar afterwards, that you will join forces with us in developing this work and developing knowledge on this really critical topic going forward. So you have our contact details, get in touch, and yes, that's from me. So thank you for all the great collaborations also with colleagues all over the world in this great work. Susanne, Klaus, if you want to say.
Yeah, I just want to say that we are open for collaboration, exchange our knowledge, help in knowledge transfer, and yeah, thanks for the opportunity to convey these messages.
Yeah, echo that. Thanks for the opportunity, and let's continue the work with this energy transition. So yeah, thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Susanne, Elena, and Klaus, to share with us the results of the Lighthouse Project of ISGAN. And yes, as you mentioned, contact them and join the sharing activities in order to keep growing and keep sharing the best practices all over the world. So now it's time to close the webinar. Thank you all for joining this webinar, and recordings as usual will be available on the ISGAN YouTube channel. So see you. Have a nice day.